What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So on this episode, it is very cold outside. The weather's been shit all week. I'm just gonna go ahead and put this engine stand together. I'm gonna get this engine up on the stand, and I started doing some thinking about it, and I'm gonna go ahead, take off the oil pan, check the rod bearings, and also probably end up replacing the rod bearings and ordering me some ARP rod bolts so that I could be rested assured that everything on the bottom end is okay. And I also ordered me some Viton O-rings in order to redo the vanos. So I need to take care of these things before I start putting the engine and everything back into the M3. I just want the added insurance that everything is going to be nice and reliable in this car, because I would definitely hate to have this engine and everything put back into the car and then something like rod knock happen. Now, the previous owner, whenever I bought the totaled M3, said that they did the recall on the bearings, he believes, from the previous owner, but he could not confirm that. And whenever I had the engine in this chassis right here, the engine started up and ran fine. It did not throw any codes related to the vanos, and I did not hear any rod noise. But like I said, I want to make sure that everything is going to be reliable. So I went ahead and got me another engine stand because I have all my engine stands occupied. So I went to Harbor Freight, got me a 1,000-pound engine stand, and we're going to go ahead and put that S54 on the engine stand. I'm going to take that oil pan off and just kind of inspect everything, and I also need to start inventorying things. So this video is going to be kind of like, I guess just a bunch of randomness stuff of me trying to get everything together, and it is what it is. So I'd like to be just slapping all this together, but you know what, I'm gonna do it right. I'm just gonna make sure everything's done right. So that's what we're gonna go ahead and do. I need to go ahead and start off by putting this stand together. Okay, we have an engine stand now. Pretty simple to assemble. So I need to take the clutch and flywheel off of this engine in order to mount it on the stand. And I'm also going to remove the transmission off of this engine as well, because the previous owner of this car told me he replaced the clutch about 500 miles before the engine catastrophically failed. So I'm going to take that transmission off, inspect it, take this off, and we'll get this mounted on the stand. Taking a clutch and flywheel off is a pretty simple task. We're going to remove these bolts that surround the pressure plate, remove the pressure plate and the friction disc, and that will expose the inner bolts that hold the flywheel on. So that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and tackle it. All right, so just like that, we have the clutch and flywheel off of the engine, but I just want to go over this clutch with you because it differs from your standard clutch and flywheel, and for the reason being it's called a dual mass. And if you look inside the inner circle of this friction disc, you have no springs like a typical standard clutch would have. That's because the springs are inside the flywheel. And for that reason, they call it a dual mass, because the outer mass right here, it moves different from the ring right there on the bottom, the base of it. And these typically are a one-time use because machine shops can't really machine the surface of these, because your standard flywheels is pretty much the same level across the whole plane, and these have a rising edge, and they don't have the equipment really to set a grinding stone in there and grind this all clean and then come back and grind that outer edge, because you can't take away material here and leave material there, because it throws the clamping force of the pressure plate out of spec. So you have to machine the outside edge with the inside edge, and a lot of companies, a lot of machine shops, they can't do that. So these are pretty much a one-time use once they reach the limit of their life. And looking at the hot spots on the inside edge right there, you can tell that it's got quite a bit of hot spots going on, and also the pressure plate as well, same thing. So let's go ahead and hope that the clutch is new on the other engine and the flywheel's in way better shape than this. So let's cross our fingers and take that transmission off and see what we got on that one. Alright guys, so it turns out he was telling the truth, and that is a big savings in my bank. As you can see, that friction disc is nice and pretty. It is new. Pressure plate, nice and new. You see how worn that one is? New, and they replaced the dual mass flywheel as well. So, boom, score. Thank you for telling the truth. They seem like pretty honest people whenever I was looking the car over, so I'm glad that that was the truth as well. So we're good to go on that. Now, I was looking at the combination of bolts in order to mount this engine to the stand, and luckily for me, I have two sets of bell housing bolts, because the ones that mount here on the side, they're really long, and that gives me a total of 4 now. And if you see right here, plenty of thread that passes through the mount right there. So I'm going to use these 4 to mount up the engine to the stand. So let's go ahead and do that next. Alright, so I had to space out these bolts in order to get them to fit just right, because they're quite long and they will interfere with the cylinders right there. So I used just some nuts that fit over the bolts, and I spaced them out like that. So I had to space them here, here, and here, and this one was able to have plenty of room to thread through right there. So that is all good to go. Now, in order to get this oil pan off, I'm gonna have to remove a couple of the accessories in order to free up the space to drop the oil pan. Along with that, they have a line that connects down here. So I'm gonna have to take that off as well. Then after that, we'll undo the bolts around the oil pan and get the oil pan off. All right, we got the oil pan off now, and since I'm gonna be redoing the vanos O-rings and whatnot, I'm gonna go ahead and take the plastic cover off, all the associated electronics that go in with this connector here, and then we'll just go ahead and remove the valve cover and everything, so it'll speed up the process once I get my parts in. All right, so we got the engine flipped upside down now. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the oil pump assembly. Now it looks like they have 3 mounting bolts here, 2 mounting bolts for the pickup tubes, and also you gotta remove this sprocket here. This, I believe, is reverse thread, so Righty's gonna loosen it off. So all that, this has to come off first, then unbolt it, and then remove it. And that's gonna free up the whole bottom end. Then we can get to taking off a cap on the rod. And I need to inspect the diameter of these bolts because there's 2 different types of bolts from what I read. In the earlier engines, they're 11 millimeter. And once they did the recall and if they did replace the rods, they have the 10 millimeter diameter bolts. So I'm curious to see which ones this has. And I need to find that out so I can order the correct ARP bolt. So let's go ahead and take this off and get a rod cap off. All right, guys, so I'm very happy I decided to do this because looking at the rod bolt diameter, 11 millimeter, fits right in there. So recall was never done on this engine, and I'll show you the condition of the rod bearings. Now, like I said, I didn't have any rod noise at all, but you can definitely see the wear on it. See the discoloration? So it was starting to wear. And if I could see, can you see the discoloration in there? Yeah, see like right on the crown area, right in there, discolored as well. So these rod bearings are actually wearing. So I would eventually had run into the problem of these bearings wearing out and me developing a rod knock. So very happy I decided to do this. Now I'm going to go ahead and order the appropriate ARP fasteners to replace the stock ones, and I need to order up some rod bearings. So if you guys, want to recommend a good rod bearing, go ahead and drop a comment down below. I'm thinking about going with the King Racing or the ACL Race. I know they work really good on Japanese engines, but this is kind of a new world to me, the BMW. So it's I just want to make sure I get a really good part to replace it with, and I won't have any issues in the future. So cool deal. Very happy I decided to do this, because that would have pissed me off putting this engine in that car, and then later on, after me getting on it and driving spiritedly, it would develop a rod knock, and then I'd have to pull it all out again and go through all this. So best to do it while I have everything out. All right, cool deal. I'm gonna start looking up some parts real quick, and I'll get back to you. All right, guys, so I'm very happy I decided to check the rod bearings and everything. And, now we know for certain that the recall was not done on this engine, but we are going to get everything right, because I'm going to order everything we need in order to get this engine put back together and be reliable, so that I can install it into the M3 and drive it spiritedly and not have any doubts at all. So my mind will be at ease, and that is a very good thing indeed. So I'm all done on this episode. It's a little bit of a short one, but it was a necessary one in order to make sure that I'm doing things right. So with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and share, guys, and I will definitely see y'all on the next episode.